Welcome to the place where we learn about and learn from the leaders in our field who are powering human creativity. I am Aaron Dworkin, and this is Arts Engines. Thanks again for joining me here on Arts Engines. Today's guest is Jeff Alexander, who serves as president of the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Aaron. Wonderful to be with you today.
So, it is, I think a lot of our audience, would love to know a little more about the details of what it is like to lead one of the great symphony orchestras of the world. So I thought we'd touch on a couple of those things today. And maybe first to kind of just start it off, obviously, a major thing that the leader of an orchestra, the president of an orchestra, needs to do is to, every several years, look at the contract that exists with the musicians and to be able to negotiate that. And obviously, some orchestras run into really difficult processes with that. What I was wondering is, could you talk about kind of how you view that process, how you've been able to so successfully do it at the CSO, and kind of what's involved in that, because I think we could all learn from that type of approach.
Well, first of all, it's a great honor to be the president of the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. I think it's an honor for anyone to be the president of any symphony orchestra in our country or anywhere around the world. It's such a wonderful occupation. We support such a fantastic art form, which is so meaningful to the world and so meaningful to so many people. The concerts that we produce, the education activities that we undertake, I've just seen over the years be so meaningful to so many people. So it's truly an honor. As far as the daily work of an orchestra president, it's really quite fascinating. I've never had a boring day in the almost 40 years that I've been doing this work. It's really multifaceted. I spend a lot of time working with our board of trustees. These are volunteers, of course, and they come from all walks of life. Very, very dedicated, very successful people. I often think how wonderful it is as an orchestra manager to get to work with people that I probably wouldn't have come in contact with in any other way. And they're so dedicated to the city, typically, and to the arts institution that on whose board they sit. And so many of our trustees sit on many boards. I also am very pleased, of course, to be able to interact with our musicians and with our music director and our guest conductors and guest artists. It's really wonderful, and our volunteer groups and our great administrative staff. So it's really multifaceted, and every day, almost every day with each of those components in different manners. It's quite enjoyable to understand long-term planning, et cetera. Yes.
Yeah, and so just a quick interlude before kind of tackling, something as involved as contract negotiations, but what you've described, right, is this amazing breadth of work, of interactions with so many different constituencies of the orchestra. As you do that work, have you ever kind of found yourself thinking that there's a particular part that gives you the most joy? Is there a part that you most look forward to?
Yeah, of course. So what gives me the most joy is attending the concerts. And fortunately, here in Chicago, there are 3 or 4 a week when we're up and running, absent the pandemic. And I very often attend every performance every week of the orchestras. And what I found fascinating in Chicago, which I hadn't seen anywhere else, is that there are a number of audience members who attend more than once per week as well. I haven't seen anybody attend 4 times, but very often I'll run into somebody in the lobby on a Saturday night who I also saw on the Thursday night, and they'll say to me, the concert was so great, I just had to come back. But for me personally, that gives me the greatest joy, absolutely.
Of course, and that's such a testament when people want to come back. for a repeat concert as opposed to even new repertoire. So it's really a testament to the quality of artistry and experience overall, clearly, that people have. So to get back to the contract negotiations, right? This is, so ultimately you're able to reach this extraordinary result, which is music emanating from the stage and sharing with audience members. But of course, there's all these mechanics that have to go into that, one of those being those contracts with musicians. And so how do you kind of go about approaching that? Do you have a philosophy that you feel has enabled you to be successful with that process?
Well, yes, I think so. I think it's very important to be incredibly respectful of the process and respectful of the members of the orchestra. Contract negotiations don't always go smoothly, and almost always there are some moments of agitation. Sometimes there are many moments of agitation. And of course, we had our own situation here in Chicago about a year and a half ago. But overall, I think it's just important to understand where the other side is coming from. It's important to listen and understand before trying to be understood. But inevitably, there are gaps, and it's just natural, in any union environment where the members of the union are seeking something more for themselves, which is quite understandable. I think we all seek more for ourselves during our lifetimes. And then depending on the financial state of the organization or the point in history of the organization, we're able to accommodate the requests or not accommodate the requests. But I think it's a healthy process. Typically, it's a healthy process. I always found it really helpful to get to know some of the members of the orchestra extremely well, because depending on the orchestra, there are 6 or 8 or 9 people on the negotiating committee, and you spend a lot of time with them for weeks and weeks and weeks, talking about short-term items, long-term items, getting to know each other. And I know some people find contract negotiations almost entirely unpleasant. I don't feel that way at all. I enjoy the time I'm together in the room with the members of the orchestra and their representatives, talking about the institution, talking about the musicians, what's best for them, what we can do for them. Again, it's often a struggle, but I think that's true in any industry setting. We're all human beings. We all have our own needs and our own desires. But getting back to what I said at the beginning, I think understanding each other, respecting each other, being open to each other's ideas are really key elements to reaching successful agreements.
Definitely, absolutely. And it's one of those big things that I hear, it sounds like, is that mutual respect, that even though you have to advocate potentially for different priorities of respective constituencies, that ultimately underlying it is the joint goal of that extraordinary performance at the end of the day, but also a mutual respect in that process. So which is great, and I think applicable to so many circumstances. So that's kind of, one thing, but you reference, which of course leads to a key question that I have, which is, in these times are truly unprecedented in so many ways, but specifically with the pandemic. As you look at that, obviously you've had to respond to that. At some point, we would hope to be back to levels of normalcy or the new normal. And what I was curious is, as you look at that, what do you see as the future for not just the Chicago Symphony, but all orchestras? Will it be a little different on the other side of this pandemic when we are, relatively speaking, fully past it? Do you see a new environment for orchestras? And are there any specific things that you could share that you think will be the reality for the Chicago Symphony?
Yes, well, I think in general, we've all become obviously more skilled at digital content, creating and disseminating digital content. And that might be one of the few good things that are coming out of the pandemic. And because of course, there were some orchestras around the world that already were pretty advanced at that, but not many. And I think that we're all getting quite good at it now. And so I think that'll be a great new tool for us to have after the pandemic is over. I'm an optimist by nature, and I think one has to be an optimist to be successful at one's work. And I think, I don't know how long it will take, but I do think we'll get back to where we were before the pandemic started. I've often said, even before the pandemic, that we're fortunate that most people need to be with other people at some point during the week or during the day. And the enjoyment of actually going out, the activity of getting to a theater, going to a theater, being in a theater or a concert hall with other people, experiencing the concert with 2,000 other people at the same time is irreplaceable. So I often think back to when I was a student. I was a French horn player, and I was a student at the New England Conservatory, and I attended Boston Symphony concerts every week. And that was a long time ago now. And they had really full houses then, and I think they have really full houses now. And of course, it's not the same people attending now as it was 40 years ago. So I think there'll always be an audience for classical music. Of course, we're up against significant challenges in our society with how education in classical music in the public schools hasn't advanced. In fact, it's gone backwards from where it was a couple of generations ago. The incredible competition we have with home entertainment. If you think back to even 20 years ago, or maybe 30 years ago now, before cable television, CNN, HBO, needless to say, before the internet and YouTube, all of those things are so entertaining. It's so easy to sit at home and be entertained for hours on end. And that's what we're competing with now. But still, we have audiences and people come and people love our concerts. So I'm very optimistic. I think post-pandemic, not knowing how long it will take, of course, but post-pandemic, we'll be back in business in full swing. Our audiences will come back and they'll get that enjoyment of the live symphonic concert experience.
Awesome, awesome, and definitely very inspirational. And I definitely hope we can definitely get there. Unfortunately, we're just about out of time, but I always like to ask, you've described, right, these breadth of experiences, and it's so clear that you have a passion for the work that you do, for what symphony orchestras can provide, offer, and share with our communities. But in all of that breadth of work, there must be some tough times. There must be challenges that, might sometimes potentially feel overwhelming. Where do you draw your own sense of inspiration? Where do you draw kind of a sense of strength from?
Yeah, well, a few places, but I get great enjoyment out of watching the audience before the concert. So when I can, for an 8 o'clock concert, for example, I'll position myself in the lobby at 7:30, and I'll watch the audience come in. And I just love watching the anticipation on their faces, the great variety of people coming in, people on dates, people celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary, and everything in between. And just the anticipation on everyone's faces. And I often think, have they been waiting and looking forward to this for a week or a month or a year? And I just get great joy out of knowing, and inspiration out of knowing how important the work we do is to the public and the people who experience the concerts and also all of our education activities.
Wow. Jeff Alexander, you truly are one of the arts engines who is powering human creativity in our world. Thank you so much for joining us here on the show.
Thank you, Aaron.